Hi, it's me. Back to another Science Sunday. We are going over baking soda versus baking powder. Okay, so for starters, the only thing that these two things actually have in common is that they're both chemical leaveners, and they look kind of the same, but that's about where it starts and ends. Chemical leavener is something that you add into a recipe to make whatever it is that you're making rise, like a cake or a cookie or something. We're going to start with baking soda because it's a little bit more complicated than baking powder, and you probably won't understand baking powder until I explain baking soda first. Okay, so first off, baking soda's real name is sodium bicarbonate. We call it baking soda as like an easier street name so people aren't scared of it, like Little Wayne or Nas or Little Dicky or something. Sodium bicarbonate in the science world is known as a base. When you mix a base with an acid, it creates carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide's a fancy name for bubbles. If you remember anything from your childhood and you had a science class, you probably made a volcano at some point. Once you get past like the paper mache object of that project, then you add the baking soda with vinegar and then it explodes. That's essentially what's happening inside of your cakes or your cookies, just on a tiny, tiny little scale. A base with an acid to create bubbles, which then in turn makes your cake rise. In order for baking soda to actually work or to do its job, it needs that acid to activate it. Acid isn't just found in like straight vinegar. You can find acid naturally in a whole bunch of stuff that you actually bake with or that you'll find in recipes. Things like buttermilk, yogurt, lemon juice, brown sugar, even honey has acid in it. Baking soda is also incredibly strong. 3 to 4 times stronger than baking powder. But don't just think that you can add a whole shit ton of baking soda to your recipe and your cake's gonna hit the sky. You need to be able to balance it out with the amount of acid that you put into it. If you don't, if you're me and you forget that you have the recipe and then you put the full amount of baking soda into it, your cake or whatever it is that you're making is going to taste like metallic-y and metal-y and disgusting. Now that you know about baking soda, let's talk about baking powder. Baking powder actually has baking soda in it. Stay with me here. It's kind of like a rectangle is a square, but a square isn't always a rectangle. Something like that. It has baking soda in it. That's the first thing. And then it also has something called cream of tartar, which is a dry acid. Baking powder is kind of like this all-in-one chemical leavener powder. Basically meaning it has everything it needs already in it. Much smaller scale than it would be if you were using baking soda and an additive acid. Baking powder is also usually double acting. Based on the name means that it's activated twice. Once when you add it and you start mixing it, and the second time when you apply heat to it, aka when you bake. It's rare that you will ever find baking powder alone in a recipe. It's usually with baking soda also. The reason you'll find both in a recipe is genuinely just how the recipe is built so that whatever it is that you're baking gets to the right height once you actually bake it. Take into account the other ingredients in that recipe that might have acid in it too. So, what have we learned today? Although baking powder and baking soda look identical, they're not the same. Soda is simply a base, whereas baking powder is the base plus the acid to be the all-in-one activation. If you have any questions in regards to baking soda, baking powder, how it works, whatever it is, feel free to send me a message. You can DM me, email me. FaceTime me is fine. I've got nothing to do. Whatever you need to do, I'm here for you. I will see you next Science Sunday. Make sure you like and you subscribe and you share. You tell your friends and their dogs and whoever else you run into on the street when you decide you can't social distance anymore and you need to go for a walk. Anything. Fine by me. Goodbye.